All right, our first speaker of the day is someone many of you know if you listen to our show regularly. And when he comes out, I want you to envision him this way, as I understand he was presented at the bar last night at this hotel, which is in a sport coat with a t-shirt, athletic shorts, long black socks, and penny loafers.
Ooh.
That fashion statement could only be that of Stephen Moore, a native of Illinois, graduate of University of Illinois. He served as the founder and president of the Club for Growth, senior economics writer for the Wall Street Journal editorial page, and he remains a regular contributor to that publication. He served as a senior economic advisor to President Trump during the 2016 campaign. He's the best-selling author of several books, including Govzilla, How the Relentless Growth of Government is Devouring Our Economy and Our Freedom, which is available for sale today. And if you buy a copy, Steve will be signing copies later this morning. Please welcome our friend, Stephen Moore.
How did you know about that guy?
You know, I have spies everywhere.
I thought I could sneak in my shorts.
Did you fly like that? I hope not. God.
So that's not fake news?
Not fake news,
Okay.
right? That's how you presented yourself last night.
Well, you know, when they asked me to do this, folks, I was told that Amy would be interviewing me, not Dan, if I would have come under those circumstances. And I just want to, you know, Dan was checking my resume, and it is true that I lied on my resume. I did not work for 1 year at McDonald's. I just want to let you all know that. Sorry about that, Dan. Oh, by the way, thanks for mentioning my latest book, Dan.
You know, I just read what they give me.
My latest book is out. It's called The Trump Economic Miracle. Guess who came up with that title?
Trump.
Trump did.
Did it really?
And it is, he wrote the foreword of the book, and we are going to win on Tuesday. I can guarantee you that. We are going to win.
So before we get into like the campaign stuff and the policy stuff, I mean, as a great modern-day philosopher once said about the significance of the passage of time,
Yes.
the passage of time is very significant if you think about it. I was thinking about the passage of time, you and the other two musketeers, Larry Kudlow and Art Laffer, and how you've gone over the last 40 years sort of as a group of, you know, free market brothers in arms,
Right.
from Reagan all the way to Trump. And I just think it'd be interesting for people to get perspective, the perspective you have of 40 years inside the Beltway with these other two free market legends, and, you know, what that travel has been like for you guys together.
Well, you left out one person who has been kind of a brother in arms, and that is, of course, Steve Forbes. So when you think about it,
Yeah.
I mean, Steve Forbes, Art Laffer, Larry Kudlow, and me, they call us the supply side Beatles, and I always say, yeah, they make the beautiful music, and I'm Ringo, and I'm banging on the drums. But you know, it's been amazing to work with them. They have been the intellectual pillars of, as you said, back to the Reagan movement. I believe, by the way, how many of you agree with me with this? I've said it on Dan and Amy's show a week or two ago. Arthur Laffer should have won the Nobel Prize in economics, right? I mean, he is the most famous economist in the world, and easily the most influential. But what do you think the chances are that he'll win a Nobel Prize?
Yeah, no, right.
Not very
Yeah,
good.
right.
So they have shaped our economic history. And look, the way I see it, Dan, is everybody says this is the most important election. And how many of you think this is the most important one? I mean, it's a pretty damn important election. But in my lifetime, the only election I think that could match this one in terms of importance was the 1980 election, when, thank God, we beat Jimmy Carter with Ronald Reagan. That was an amazingly important election. And that was a pivot point for the U.S. economy. Reagan got in, Amy, with his agenda of limited government, of lower tax rates, deregulate, make the American military the strongest in the world. Reagan won the Cold War without firing a shot. He rebuilt it. How many of you remember Jimmy Carter and 8 and 9 and 10, 11% inflation? I was growing up. I was a teenager here in Chicago at the time. I remember literally every time you would go to the store and buy something, it was, you know, 5 or 10% more expensive. And so you saw a boom in the U.S. economy. I mean, one statistic that I find to be awe-inspiring is that when Reagan came into office, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, you know what it was? 1,000. 1,000. Think about this. Here we are 40-some years later, and we have Dow 40,000.
Yeah.
So we've
Well-
lived through the greatest period of wealth creation in the history of the world. And it didn't happen by accident. Reagan laid the groundwork for this. And actually, I have to say, Bill Clinton was pretty fiscally conservative. He's the only president of modern times where we had a balanced budget. And then Trump was an amazing president. And yet then we've seen with Biden, who I think, how many of you agree with me, worst president in modern times? I mean, unbelievable.
Well, but do you think he's worse than Jimmy Carter? Because I remember
That's
mortgage
close.
rates
That's
were
close.
18.9%. And I also remember being in gas lines. And I remember my mom being upset about the cost of everything
remember
when
all
we were at the grocery store. So I just feel like Biden reminds me a lot of Carter. And I hope that they're exactly alike, that they're just both one-term presidents.
I agree. And, it's close between those two, Jimmy Carter and Biden. But I don't want to scare you all. But and people always ask me, if God forbid Kamala wins this election, and she will not. But if she does, will she be as bad as Biden? And Dan, I say no to that. I think she'll be a lot worse. I think you all know this, but it's a point I wish the campaign would just state day after day after day, that Kamala Harris was in the United States Senate for 4 years, and she had the most left-wing voting record of the entire 100 senators in the entire United States Senate. And that includes Bernie Sanders. How many of you knew that? She has a more liberal voting record than Bernie Sanders, a avowed socialist. So this woman is a true believer, I think, Dan, in the left-wing vision of, what do they always say, they want to not remake America, but what is it, the Great Reset and all this. They want to kind of remake America. That's not the term they...
Transform.
The Great Transformation. I don't want to transform this country. I think it's the greatest nation on earth. We don't need a transformation. All we need is a movement towards freedom and free enterprise.
Well, I mean, the thing, too, is thinking about, comparing Reagan, Carter to Trump, Kamala. I mean, over the intervening 44 years, things have gotten a lot worse in terms of the size of government, the size of the debt, the shrinkage of the American citizen and his freedom, right? I mean, that's sort of, it was a nice segue, because I was thinking about, what Hayek said, which is to be controlled in our economic pursuits is to be controlled in everything. And we're so much more controlled in our economic pursuits today than we were under Carter 44 years ago. And one wonders what being controlled in our economic pursuits would look like if Kamala Harris was president.
It scares the hell out of me. Does it scare the hell out of you? I mean, I'm terrified that this woman could become president. I don't think she will. I do think Trump is going to win. And I think, by the way, I was thinking about this in preparation for coming up here. You've got the worst mayor in America here in Chicago, right?
People didn't think it
the
could
worst
get worse
mayor.
than Lori Lightfoot, and it did.
Yeah, you've got the worst mayor. You've got the worst, is it fair to say he's the worst governor in America?
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's
And
more than
please,
fair.
Illinois, don't give us the worst president in history. The good news is that Illinois, as you know, Dan and Amy, I grew up here. I love the city of Chicago. I love the state of Illinois. I went to U of I. It's dumbfounding to me, Amy, as someone who you've lived here your whole life. What's wrong with this state? Why don't people see how crazy this woman is and the damage that she would do? She's not a centrist Democrat. She's not a Bill Clinton Democrat. She's not a JFK Democrat. She is a true believer in the left-wing idea that the government is the solution to every single problem. And she will bankrupt this country if we allow her to be president. And we have 2 or 3 days to make sure that doesn't happen. And, Illinois is an important state, because we could pick up 2 or 3 House seats here, and that could determine who has control of the United States House. So just because Illinois isn't going to go red at the top of the ticket, we could win city council races, we could win school board races, we could win state legislative races. In other words, you have the power to turn this state a lot redder than it is today, and that would send a thunderous message.
Well, I'm going to be looking at how many people in Illinois voted for Trump. In 2016, it was 2.4. In 2020, I believe it was 2.14.
Wow.
So I'm looking forward to seeing how many people vote for Trump because I have never seen more Trump signs. I drove around Woodridge. I was in Mount Prospect, Arlington Heights. Huge Trump signs.
You know
And
what
I
I
would
find-
not. I never saw that in 2020, and I never saw that in 2016.
So it's a great point. I made this point on Sean Hannity's show the other night on Fox. My second favorite show to do every week. My first favorite show to is the
Better
Dan
be.
Amy show. But
What an
it is
apple
so
polisher.
interesting when and Dan, maybe you can explain this to me because it is so confounding. So I've come back to Chicago all the time, and I drive through the Chicago area. And when I go into the very wealthy neighborhoods, Chicago, Winnetka, Kenilworth, Wilmette, those areas, all unbelievable. Kamala.
Yeah.
And then I go to the working class areas of the city.
Mount Prospect.
Trump. What's wrong with these people in Kenilworth and Winnetka and all these?
I don't know. They're your
I mean-
people. That's you. You're from New Trier. You tell us.
I just think it's Trump derangement syndrome. I think that deep in their hearts that they know he will be better for our country when it comes to wars, when it comes to the economy. But I just think that they can't physically get themselves to vote for him. Now, one thing that I was giving me hope about the election is that I have a lot of higher ups in the Democratic Party that attend my church.
Yeah.
And they are having an all-day prayer session because, as my pastor said, people are at the end of the rope. They're so worried. And they might know something that we don't know. Like Michelle Obama's friends, they go to our church, or my church, and they're having, I know you're shaking your head, but there's something there.
Don't overcomplicate this. I mean, to get off of economics for a second, just don't overcomplicate this. There's nothing that they know that we don't know. Here's what we know. One statistic that is insurmountable. I mean, barring something that has never before happened, 80% of the people think the country's on the wrong track.
Right.
That is insurmountable for an incumbent.
Yes.
And so we can go through crosstabs and different segments of the electorate and the arguments about what he did or didn't say about Liz Cheney and the arguments about what she did or didn't say about, well, just about everything. I mean, at the end of the day, you cannot overcome that, which is what I go back to again and again in trying to look at this and think, like, what is the path to victory for her? And I do not see one. So we were saying backstage, and this is something a pollster friend of mine said, who's in Trump world, said, I said, what's your handle on this? You see a lot more numbers than I do. He said, I'm nervous about how confident I am.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And it's I get it. I get being gun shy after 2020, and we're in Cook County, so there's all kinds of reasons to be gun shy. Well, we're in DuPage, but you Chicago land. But I'm nervous about how confident I am. That's why all of these signals are pointing in a singular direction.
Agree with that, and you're right. And the question about do you think the economy's heading in the right direction? 2/3 say no. How do you think the country? 3/4 say it's in the wrong direction. You're right about that. Every single poll, and it's been.
I mean,
for the last 3 years.
Even Trump, after a decade of demonization and prosecution and convictions, he's at his most personally popular percentage right now.
Yeah.
The last Gallup poll had him more personally popular than Kamala Harris. So he's more personally popular. His policies are more popular. 80% of the country thinks it's on the wrong track, and she's going to win Arizona and Georgia? No.
I mean, he's
No.
I've gotten to know Trump very well personally. I love the man. I think he's not just a great American. He's a good person. And there's a side of Trump that a lot of Americans just don't see. I had dinner with him about 3 months ago at Mar-a-Lago, where about 7 or 8 of us having kind of strategy dinner and talking about the economy. And I don't know if you've heard me tell this story, but he's sitting there, and the guy next to me is drinking a glass of wine as we're having dinner. And Trump turns to him and says, "Hey, Bill, do you know I don't drink?" And by the way, did you know that Trump doesn't?
Yeah, I never
drink?
have.
Oh, no,
I'd been
I
around-
know.
I'd
I've known.
been around him all the time. It never occurred to me. I never saw him with a drink. He said, Bill, do you know I don't drink? And then Trump goes, Bill, can you imagine me if I drank? He has a great, self-effacing humor. And let me make this point because, look, I disagree with Trump on a lot of issues. Not a lot, but some. I don't like tariffs. You don't like tariffs. And I argue with him about that. And some of his other policies, he was kind of a big spender. You know, we spent too much money. I hate to tell you this, folks, but Republicans love to spend money just as much as Democrats do. But even when I would argue with him about an issue, and he would, he was the president, so he would make the decision, I always walked out of the room saying, okay, I disagree with them, but I really believed, Amy, in every single circumstance, his foremost thought was putting America first. And folks, we need a president who puts America first, because Joe Biden did not do that for 4 years. And I assure you, Kamala Harris won't. I mean, I laugh when I see, did you see in the debate when Kamala Harris was saying against Trump, she's like, well, all the foreign leaders want me to be president. Well, of course they do.
Yeah.
Because she's going to give them she's not going to put America first. She wants, they really do want kind of a universal global government, and that scares the crap out.
So I want more behind the scenes of like you, Laffer, Kudlow with Trump. Does he like critique your performances on TV? What are those conversations like?
Or does he give you suggestions on what to say
Yeah,
when
you-
you're advocating for him?
Trump is going to do what he's going to do, and he's going to say what he's going to say. You can't put a collar on that man. But he has great instincts. He loves America. I'll tell you, I think I mentioned this on your show on Wednesday, but I was at Madison Square Garden, and I'd been with him at Trump Tower before. So we rode over in a motorcade down Fifth Avenue, and it's about a mile from Fifth Avenue, his Trump Tower, to Madison Square Garden. And so the motorcade is going by, and folks, you would have thought America had won World War II. I mean, it was the most, there must have been 50, 60,000 people out there just to catch a glimpse of his motorcade. So, and these were not, rich people. These were, Hispanic. And by the way, inside the Madison Square Garden, where there was not one single seat empty, and I asked one of the security guards there, when's the last time, he said the last time this place was completely full was when Billy Joel played here. So it was a big deal to see that many people there. There were 4 times many people wanted to attend that rally as could fit into the place. But all I saw was blacks, Hispanics, young people, old people, Asian people. I mean, people of all color, all ethnicity, everybody rooting for Trump. And when I came away from that, I thought, oh my God, he's gonna win. I'm going to give you a guarantee. We are going to turn America red on Tuesday all over this country.
And how many people were outside of Madison Square Garden that were trying to get into the event?
It's amazing.
There's a lot of people.
Yeah, people would come up to me and say, "Aren't you Steve Moore, who's on the Dan and Amy show?" And I said,
Yeah, right.
no, just,
Right,
but
yeah,
no, it was
right.
really amazing how many people were just, you could barely get in within 3 blocks of Madison Square Garden because there were so many people there. I mean, there is a huge enthusiasm. I mean, Kamala has a chance of winning. I think it's maybe 1 in 4 chance, but the enthusiasm gap is so pronounced. I mean, so people who are voting for Trump are voting for hope, and people who are voting, for Kamala are voting because they hate Trump. Is there anybody in America who actually think that Kamala Harris would be a good president? I mean, seriously.
Maybe
Is there anybody in this room who thinks Kamala Harris would be a good president?
Maybe Doug
I mean,
Emhoff.
hell no.
I don't know.
Oh, Dougie.
So you've been around Trump for the last decade, just about. So what do you think? How has he evolved, or how has he changed? What do you think his attitude is going to be going into his second and final term? What are the changes you think that are afoot?
Well, first of all, this idea that he's going to be a dictator. I mean, I have friends, I have family members who actually think he's never going to leave office. I mean, people.
Do you remind them that he was president for 4 years?
Yeah, exactly.
Before?
So here's what I think. This is why I'm so excited. First of all, I think it's going to be like taking a champagne bottle if he wins and shaking it up. This economy is going to explode. It's so ready to explode. And so we're going to hit the ground running. Dan, we've got about 150 executive orders on his desk on January 22nd or whatever.
20th.
Whatever that day is that
21st,
he's
I guess,
inaugurated. And you know what we're going to do, folks? We're going to repeal every single executive order that was signed into law by Joe Biden, every one of them. And the first one on that list, you know what's going to be first on the list?
The border.
We are pulling America out of the anti-America Paris Climate Accord. All right? We're out of there. I know you're a big supporter of that
Yeah,
one.
right. So what? I mean, from these conversations, what else is? You give us the priority list. What else?
So we're going to do the tax cut. We're going to make sure that that tax cut is made
Extended.
permanent. It was a huge benefit. You know, we had the highest tax rate in the world when Trump came in, and we lowered that, not because we love corporate America and big business. We did that because we wanted to bring jobs back, and boy, did that work as soon as we did it. Are you familiar with the term, Dan and Amy, corporate inversion? Do you know what that is? For those of you who don't know, that's when an American company would leave the United States and take the jobs with them, and they would go to Bermuda, or they'd go to Ireland, or they'd go to, you know, China or some other country where the tax, so they could save money on taxes. Because guess what? You know, taxes do have a big impact on where companies locate. And so we had dozens and dozens under Obama of major companies. Almost every week you'd see a major company that was leaving the United States and taking the jobs in the factories with them. And so what we did was we lowered the rate from the highest in the world to one of the lowest in the world, and it was like magic. As soon as do you know, Dan, how many corporate inversions there have been since the Trump tax cut? 0. Not one company has left the United States since that happened. And by the way, that's because Biden hasn't been able to repeal our tax cut. If Kamala Harris gets in, she said her first priority is to raise those tax rates back up again. And you're just like people leaving Illinois for Florida, you're going to see American businesses leaving, taking the jobs with them. And by the way, do you know, Dan, what country in the world has the lowest corporate tax rate?
Russia?
No.
Ireland?
Ireland. Ireland, very good. I don't, you know, he's pretty good at this stuff. So,
He was
by the way,
just
do you know, Dan, why Ireland is a great place to invest in?
Because it has the lowest corporate tax
Yes,
rate.
but there's another. Yes, well, I'll give you a B for that. The real reason is because the capital is always Dublin. Oh, I know that's a terrible.
Oh, see? Guy's a comedian. You didn't know that, huh? All right,
He's
so-
never gonna. They're never gonna have me on the show
I mean,
again
this
after
is,
that one.
You know, this is the sort
By
of
the
humor
way,
you get from economists.
By the way, that's an old Arthur Laffer joke.
Yeah,
You've seen
it's
that.
very-
Bad dad
good.
jokes. All right, so the last economic report card came in with the October job numbers, which were 12,000. Yikes. How do you think that's going to affect Kamala Harris' campaign, or do you think people don't even care that are
Yeah.
Democrats?
Whew, was that a bad report? I mean, it could not have come at a worse time for Kamala Harris. In fact, I would say, Dan, when you look at that report, it should be game, set, match. I mean, for 4 days before the election to have the worst jobs report in 4 years is astounding. We lost private sector jobs. Amy, guess what sector of the economy is growing the fastest?
Government.
Government. Everybody knows that. Government.
You didn't even give me a chance to respond.
They slipped you the answer, Amy. But
Government's the largest employer in Illinois, right?
yeah, we've seen this in every single report, Dan. I mean, we've talked about this on the Dan and Amy show, month after month after month. Every report comes in, government's way up here, private sector is, and by the way, the government, we want the government to be shrinking, right? Not growing. We want to shrink the government. And so that's true now. The GDP report, which just came out a couple of days before the employment report, they said, 2.8% GDP growth. You know, it's a pretty good number, 2.8. It's not great, but it's pretty good. But guess what the biggest sector, guess what drove the economic growth? Government. By the way, why do we call, this is a good question for you, Dan. I know why is government spending reported as a good thing? Really? I mean,
Because it propagates government spending?
yeah. No,
I mean, it's
ridiculous.
It's one of the
we
rigs.
should count government spending as a negative thing for the economy, because what we found was the U.S. economy, the private sector grew by 2.5%, and the government grew by 5%.
Right.
We are on a path where the government is just going to swamp the entire private economy. And by the way, you can't have a government job unless you take money from a private sector worker and give it to the government.
Yeah, there you go.
It's so obvious.
If government is the driver of growth, we should just eliminate the private sector.
Shh, don't give them any ideas.
I want to go back to the corporate inversions thing because it's interesting and it factors into the whole discussion about tariffs. But sort of the cultural point, the sort of political, economic, cultural point is, you know, his saber rattling in the direction of John Deere or the automakers about moving plants overseas or down to Mexico.
Yeah.
You know, to me, it signals an informal decoupling of the Republican Party from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I don't want to be punitive to the Fortune 1000 or the Fortune 500 because, you know, we want businesses to grow and capital and labor to flow. But I do like the idea that the Fortune 1000 is not going to be calling the shots if you have a Trump presidency and a Republican majorities.
Republicans need to be the party of small business, right? Small business, not corporate America. And look, I'm not against corporate America. I want our companies to be the best in the world. I've just bought, I'm very proud of myself. Actually, I should say my wife is proud of us. She bought 1,000 shares of NVIDIA stock a year and a half ago. And boy, that thing's very, I'm rich now because I bought NVIDIA stock.
Steve Moore's buying at the bar later today.
But so, of course, I want the strongest stock market. I want people to get rich. By the way, how many in this room have a 401k plan? Raise your hand. Look, I mean, about at least half of you do. Have you seen what's happened to 401k plans under Biden? The average 401k plan, when you adjust the returns for inflation, has lost about $25,000. How do they keep saying this is a good economy? How can you have 23 Nobel economists say that Kamala Harris would be better for the economy than Donald Trump when, folks, get my book, The Trump Economic Miracle, which I wrote with Arthur Laffer. We go through every single economic statistic, the 25 major measurements of how a president performs. On 22 of those 25, Trump had a superior record. And clearly on the stock market, when you adjust for inflation, Trump did better. But these Nobel Prize economists said, we think, are you ready for this? They said, we think that Kamala Harris would be better for inflation than Kamala would be.
Were they paid off,
How
though?
could you say that? The average inflation rate under Biden and Kamala Harris has been 7%. It was 1.5% under Trump. So what kind of lunatic would say, oh, well, she's going to be better on...
Were they paid off?
Well, they give Nobels to people like Paul Krugman. That's why.
Okay.
The Musk factor, Musk and now John Paulson heading up some sort of government efficiency commission. What do you think?
Oh, I love this. I mean, I've been advocating for this for 35 years. You all know this. Everyone in this room knows this. At least, well, let me say, how many of you think, I'm going to give you some options. How many of you think the government wastes 20 cents of every dollar? How many of you think 40 cents of every dollar? How many cents say over 50% of every dollar? So there is, I mean, I don't know if it's that high, but I truly think you could eliminate 1 out of every $3 the government spends, and nobody in this room or nobody in the state of Illinois would even know what's missing. I'm serious. All we have done, every time you all vote, and I don't mean you in this room, but people in Illinois, you keep voting for more and more government spending, more and more federal government taxation, more and more government regulation. The only people who benefit from that are people who live in the swamp. Why do you keep growing the swamp? Do you know, Dan and Amy, that 3 of the 5 richest counties in the United States are in and around Washington, D.C.? Isn't that amazing? We don't produce anything. All we produce is lawyers, lobbyists, politicians and rules and regulations, and we're getting rich off of it. Stop sending your money to Washington.
But here's the thing, though. So you started out by reminding people that there's a lot of Republicans who like to spend other people's money too, which of course is true. So now factor that into this Musk, John Paulson effort under this. Let's play out this rosy scenario with Trump and Republican majorities in the House and the Senate. So what's your temperature on Mike Johnson and the leadership in the House and whoever the new Senate Majority Leader would be and the Senate? Like, how much resistance is Trump going to run into in Congress?
Well, I wish I got to be honest with you folks. I do not believe that, Republicans are going to come in. Let's say we have a Republican, let's say, I think there's about a 1 in 3 chance you could have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and Trump in the White House. And 1 in 3.
More like 2 and 3, but
You do? Okay, well, I hope you're right. So if they run the table, are they going to cut spending? No. I've been to this movie before. This is not. I mean,
but the question is, I know what they do.
Yeah.
But the question.
I mean, are you surprised by that answer?
No, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
But my question is
it's just all the.
Well,
what I mean is they're not going to grow spending as much as the Democrats.
No,
would.
but I want to understand what you think the impact of this exogenous event
Commission.
would be. The exogenous event is Musk and company.
Yeah, I think it's huge because what happens is, when Trump is talking about this commission that looks under the hood of the government and looks at all these agencies, that terrifies Washington. I mean, that's like taking a cross and putting it in front of a vampire. The last thing they want is people know how the money is being spent. I mean, folks, only 1 out of 10 federal workers, only 1 out of 10 is working full-time, 40 hours a week in the office today. Only 1 out of 10. If you go into these, you've been to Washington, both of you have been to Washington, most of you, you see these massive government buildings, you know, Department of Labor, Department of Interior, Department of Education. You know, every once in a while I actually go into those buildings. They're empty. There's nobody there. And maybe that's a good thing, by the way, that they're not working. But my point is, most people don't even know they're not on the job. Why don't they know that they're not on the job? Because they don't do anything that has any relevance to our lives. So just let's reduction in force 40% of federal workers. How about that? I mean, let's just get rid of these people. They're not doing anything. And then the spending programs, I mean, my God, we still have programs, Dan and Amy, that, you know, when I came to Washington in the early 80s, when Reagan was president, we were talking about getting rid of, you know, the Amtrak subsidies and the, you know, the
NPR, NEA, all that.
Excuse me.
Right.
And guess what? Here we are 40 years later, they're bigger than ever.
Right.
So you could just eliminate so many of these programs. I mean, every agency, and the thing is, who better than Elon Musk to do that? I mean, he's one of the greatest entrepreneurs in American history. He knows how to run things. I do believe that, and people, actually Trump asked me the other day, well, if I win, Steve, what do you want to do? And I said, you know, I don't have any burning desire. I don't want to give up my job with you guys on Wednesday mornings.
Who would?
You know, I did say, like, Mr. President, you know what I would really be interested in doing? I want to be the executive director for the Elon Musk Government Reform Commission, because I'm here to tell you, I think we could cut $1 trillion of government spending every year. That's a pretty good number.
And
Would you give up the Department of Education for that? Is that part of
Just
it?
send it back. You know, this is the other issue. I'm so glad you brought this up, because I think the most important issue for our country right now is school choice. I really do. Every single child in America should have the opportunity to go to the best school that they can. You know, I was blessed. I went to a great public high school. I went to New Trier. I went to back then it was a good school.
Yeah.
But my point is, it is so hypocritical for the left to keep talking about income inequality, how much they care about minorities, and they will not yet let young black kids, young Hispanic kids go to a great school. And I've seen school choice around the country. It works. Chicago has, is it safe to say, some of the worst public schools in the country?
That's safe to say.
And, you know, it's
Talk
not
about
like
empty
you're not...
buildings.
Plus, you spend more than just about any other. You spend a fortune, like $20,000 per kid.
30.
What are you getting for it? What?
30.
30?
30K, yeah.
20.
How do you waste
$5 years
$30,000
ago.
a year per kid and they don't learn anything? I mean, you know, you were the one who told me about that study that there was something like 25 schools in the state where no kid can read or do math at grade level proficiency. Close the damn things down. Close it down if it's not working.
The spending piece, though, back at the federal level, you talk about 40% reduction in force across the board in the administrative state. Like, is this a conversation you've had with Trump? Is this where he's like, I'm going to unleash Elon Musk on these people, and I got some other things to do, but you know he's going to write point on this sort of thing?
I hope so. I mean, look, I haven't had
That
those kind
detail.
of conversations,
Yeah.
but you know, look, in business, what you try. How many of you in this room run or operate a business? A lot of you do. Gosh, a lot. At least it looks like about half of you. What do? You try to drive your expenses down, right? And you try to drive your revenues up. In government, it's exactly the opposite. Think about this. The incentive in Washington, if you run an agency, your incentive is not to drive your budget down. It's to drive your expenses up, because you gain power. You know, if you were the head of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, you don't have an incentive to cut your budget. You get power by having a bigger budget. So everybody wants more, which is exactly, you see what I'm saying, folks? That's the opposite incentive that you have as a businessman or woman, where you drive your expenses down, and guess what? You make a profit. And I'm not kidding. In Washington, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden think profit is a dirty word. They do. They think profit is evil. You don't have any businesses. You don't have any workers if you don't have profit. This country was built on the profit motive.
And so, I mean, other than extending the tax cuts, I mean, which is a $4 billion deal, I mean, that's a huge thing to extend the Trump tax cuts. Is there another signature piece of legislation or area of legislating that there's particular focus on, or he wants you guys to focus on?
Well, when Trump is president, I guarantee this, we are going to get rid of the electric vehicle mandate and let Americans buy whatever car they want to buy, because this is America, right? We're not having the government telling us what car we want to buy. We are going to get rid of all the green energy crap. There's, people always say, do you really think we could cut, a trillion? Yeah, I can. Tomorrow, I could cut $300 billion, just get rid of the green energy slush fund. $300 billion, not million, $300 billion. Do you think that money is for saving the planet?
Well, you said there's 150.
That money is not for saving the planet.
At the beginning, or toward the beginning of this conversation, you said there was 150 executive orders he's going to overturn right away. The Paris Climate Accord, the border.
What's that?
What about the border? Is that in the top 10?
Oh, the border, of course. That I guarantee you, the day that Donald Trump gets into office, we are going to secure the border. I guarantee that's going to happen, and it's going to happen. Boom, the first day. But there's so much more. I mean, look. We could be producing 3 or 4 million more barrels a day of oil, and we're going to do that. We're going to produce all American energy. We're going to produce oil, gas, coal, everything that works, nuclear power. Let's use it all. We were energy self-sufficient for the first time in American history, or at least in our lifetimes when Trump was president. So it's going to be I guarantee you guys, the first 100 days, it's going to be a complete reversal, and we are going to do things that just explode the economy. On the regulatory front, did you know, I think we've talked about this on your show, we spent $7 billion to build recharging
stations, yeah.
And I think you've mentioned this. Guess how many have been built? 7. 7 out of 7 billion. We spent $40 billion to connect people onto the internet. Mm-hmm. Guess how many people they've connected to the internet? Zero. These people, it's not just they're ideologically wrong, they are completely incompetent. Now, I know that's a harsh thing to say because we have Pete Buttigieg running the Department of Transportation, and boy, has he done a wonderful job. But they just have completely incompetent people who are running they're ideologues. They don't know anything about what they're supposed to be doing.
The energy sector piece, though, seems to me, that's economic security plus national security issue, too. That seems to me central to an economic plan.
And this is a point that Trump makes, that he's made this point, but he doesn't explain. You've heard him in both the debates, the debate between Biden and the debate with Kamala. He keeps saying, well, if I'd been president, we wouldn't have had that war in Russia. And I happen to believe that's true, but he doesn't explain why. He just asserts it. He doesn't say why. And the answer to that is obvious. The reason that we would not have Soviet tanks in Ukraine today is because Trump would have pumped so much oil. The only resource, the only business that Russia has is the oil money they get. So we essentially, by shutting down the pipelines, by shutting down American energy, we essentially gave $100 billion to Russia. And what did they use that money for? So you come in, you cut off that source of revenue for Russia. I do think within 6 months he will have an armistice, and I think you're going to have the war in Ukraine over. And we don't have to send them another $100 billion, right?
Peace and prosperity. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Let's give Steve Moore a round of applause. Steve Moore.
We're going to win. We're going to turn Illinois red. We're going to turn Wisconsin red. We're going to turn Indiana red.
Okay, Howard
We're going to turn Michigan red. We're going to turn Pennsylvania red. We're going to win everywhere. But you got to get out and vote. More. Get out and vote. Do your piece. One serious point. Get out there. Go to the polls, and you can poll watch. You can make sure, drive somebody to the polling booth. Think about this. The last 4 elections, of 4 of the last 6 presidential elections have been decided by less than 1/2 of a percentage point. Yep. So every single vote counts. We got to get our people out. I know Trump has an awesome machine, and if we do that in every state, boy, are we going to be happy on Wednesday. Yeah. I can't wait when we do. Do you think we'll have a winner on Wednesday morning when we do the show?
I do.
Yeah. All right. How many of you think Trump is going to win? All right.
Yeah. And real quick, how many of you have voted early?
Yeah.
Just want to get a pulse.
Oh, all right. By the way, I've looked at the statistics. I don't want to get people too hyped up here, but we're on early voting in North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona. We are we are way, way ahead of the Democrats. So that is because we were running way behind. So that's a really good sign. I don't want to jinx things,
Yeah.
but things are looking really good.
And in the next 3 days, Trump is making 10 campaign stops, and a lot to North Carolina, too.
In Pennsylvania, we're going to that little town out of what was the town for The Office, the TV show The Office? Scranton.
Scranton.
We're
Yeah.
going
Scranton
to
Joe, you're going to Joe
We're
Biden's.
going to Scranton on Monday.
You're doing a stop at Dunder
This guy
Mifflin?
is so indefatigable. We have to literally, I'm not exaggerating, when I travel occasionally with Trump on the campaign trail, not very often, but you do like 1 or 2 days of that, and you're completely exhausted. And the guy is like a freak of nature. His energy level is really amazing. And
Well, that's because he's not hanging out in hotel bars drinking all the time. Like,
Wearing activewear and a suit
I have
coat.
one last idea, and then I'll go off the stage. How about this? How about making Dan Proft the president of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and then he could close it down, and we wouldn't have to subsidize those idiots anymore.
Yes,
I'd
Steve
love
Moore,
to watch him fire big.
future executive director of the Elon Musk Government Accountability Commission. Steve is going to head to the atrium. We'll be signing copies of his books, including The Trump Economic Miracle, in the next hour. So please make sure to stop by.
One last
pick
thing
up
we're
a
never
copy.
going to do, folks. I promise this may be the most important thing, and I've talked to Trump. We will never allow the government to shut down our schools again, and we're never going to let them shut down our businesses, and we're never going to let them shut down our hospitals. Never again. It was the greatest mistake in the history of America. They're not shutting down our economy ever again. It's the worst mistake we ever made.
All right. He's going to be the head of Musk Efficiency Commission and the CDC director. All right. Thanks, Steve.